Hello everyone. Today I'm gonna watch 12 horror stories animated. I'm gonna react to it. I need my blanket because someone's getting it. Go snuggle up. Go to get some popcorn, or you can just go to just watch here and just chill. But always get your blanket. Let's watch, people.
My name is Dan. This happened 3 years ago. I moved out of my parents' house once I started making a steady paycheck. I'm a plumber, and one day I had to go to someone's house to fix some pipes. There was a married couple and their daughter living there. Their daughter was 22 at the time. She was 6 months older than me, and her name was Amanda. While I was working, she was talking to me, asking if I was single and stuff like that. And to be honest, she seemed pretty cute. We exchanged phone numbers and eventually started dating. And she even moved into my house. We were 3 months into our relationship, and stuff started to get out of hand. She was always getting mad and annoyed so easily. She always started arguments, and so on. This began to happen all of the time, even in public, which was incredibly embarrassing. One day I had enough, and I had to break up with her, and I told her to leave and never come back. Amanda was pretty pissed off when I said that. I just ignored her when she was packing her stuff. She finally left, or so I thought. After that day, she would always show up at my house, harass me, throw rocks in my window, and so on. I'd called the cops many times, but she was gone by the time they showed up. About a month later, when I came home from working, I would find her in her house, yelling at me to come back, or I'd find writing on my walls that would say, "Come back, or I'll kill you." The writing eventually went from pencil to marker, and then around fucking blood. And Jess, I'm being serious when I said blood. That bitch carved my name a bunch of times into her arms and legs. She only got into my house because I forgot to take the house key back from her at the time. In hindsight, I'm such an idiot, I know. That psycho knew where my parents lived and showed up to their house during the night. My mom almost had a heart attack when she woke up to the sound of a knife being tapped on the window glass. When she woke up, she saw Amanda standing there, staring at her, making noise in the window outside, and started yelling at her to stay away from me and my family. But she screamed at the top of her lungs and charged at me with a knife. I punched her right in the face, which knocked her out. I called the cops and made sure Amanda didn't wake up while they were arriving. The cops came quickly while Amanda was knocked out. They found my house key on her, and she was arrested and eventually sentenced for a long while. After Amanda was sentenced, my parents and I moved out of state because we'd like to stay as far away from Amanda as we possibly can, because she will eventually be released.
Creepy stranger at a hotel.
This happened to me at the beginning of this year, just after I lost my husband to meningitis. I had moved in with my father and taken a job at a local hotel. It was a nice, cushy job that wasn't very stressful, and it was also nice to me in my grief-stricken state. The job was the night shift front desk manager position. So I was watching scary movies or listening to creepy podcasts that seemed to help keep me awake. My husband had never liked scary things like I did, so it was nice getting back to something that was mine. Being the night worker, I was always by myself during my shift. The hotel was new, so it wasn't creepy to be by myself, especially since there was always someone around as far as guests went. And on top of that, my boss was always a phone call away. I knew I'd have backup if needed. Anyway, it was a night like any other. I was in the back office behind the desk, watching the cameras and listening to a podcast while twirling a pen around, waiting for hours to tick away. The hotel was pretty empty, so I felt more alone than usual. I looked down at my phone as my podcast ended and went to pick another one when I noticed movement outside the building on the cameras. A guest was walking in. I hadn't seen a car pull in from the driveway camera, but I chalked it up to me just not paying attention and went to the desk. The man walked in, and I quickly noticed his clothes were dirty, tattered, and that he had this odd smell to him. Metallic smelling. I shook off the weird feeling and looked up at his face before greeting him. And I noticed that his eyes weren't on me, but the wall behind, just above me. I followed his gaze, wondering what he could be looking at, but there wasn't anything there. I was confused, but thought maybe he was lost in thought. I greeted him again, but his gaze still remained on the wall. I was starting to get freaked out, but kept my cool and cleared my throat. "Sir, is there something I can help you with?" I asked more firmly. Quickly, his eyes flicked down, and those eyes were wide and crazy looking. It startled me enough that I took a small step back. His previously blank expression grew into that of a crazed, wide smile. He was missing teeth, and the second his lips parted, I could smell his rotten breath. It made my stomach churn. Before I could open my mouth, I watched his eyes slowly creep up and down my body, as if he were undressing me with his eyes. Then his eyes moved to my hand, and his smile faded into a hate-filled glare. His eyes were on my wedding ring. Well, yes, I still wore it, as I wasn't ready to give it up yet. "What the heck is that?" he asked, his voice thick and gruff and full of anger. "My wedding ring, sir. I'm married," I said, thinking maybe he was drunk. His glare got worse as his eyes met mine again. "Married? You lying bitch. You never told me you were married. You lied to me." "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about, and I'm afraid that I'm going to have to ask you to leave." I was so scared at that moment, but tried desperately not to cry. He was still shouting at me. "So, you're kicking me out of my own home? You're a little hussy. I'm taking what's owed to me. Get over here." He reached across the counter to try and grab me, and I let out a scream, stumbled back, tripping over my long skirt. I crawled quickly for the office door as he rushed to the counter. He grabbed my shirt, tearing it down the back as I went to slam the door shut, and I slammed it on his hand, making him scream in pain as I heard the bones break. As he let me go, I managed to finally shut and lock it before going into my boss's office. And as I dialed 911, I could hear him screaming at the office door, kicking as hard as he could to get it open. The operator stayed on the phone with me until the cops arrived. It took 3 grown officers and a taser gun to take him down and get him in the car. When everything was safe, I was sat down for a statement, and my boss and father were called. As my father was getting me into his truck, I heard an officer say that the man was a highly wanted man from Florida who had escaped a psychiatric facility. After he escaped the facility, he went looking for young brunette girls who were heavyset like me, or rather like his late wife. He had killed her and cut out her eyes and breasts, and done the same to 2 other girls in Alabama, so I could only guess he planned to do the same to me. Thank God for strong deadbolts and all of the police officers.
I used to work at a call center company, and my shift started at 11 p.m. Since training, I'd heard a lot of ghost stories about our building. Of course, I didn't believe them, and I really wouldn't have cared anyway, because all I cared about was work. One night, I went on a short break to go to the comfort room. Our office is located at the left corner of the building, and usually it's quite dark compared to the other office corners. I normally use the comfort room in the middle of our building because it's bigger and a lot of people go there. But since it was just a short break, I chose to use the executive's comfort room because it was much closer. Besides, it was always clean and looked a lot nicer compared to the other ones. When you enter the comfort room, the first thing you see on your right side are 2 sinks, a large mirror, and 2 lights above them. Then there are 3 cubicles on the right side and 2 cubicles on the left side of the room. When I entered, I noticed that the room was a little bit darker than usual. Some of the lights were not on, and only the cubicle in the corner on the right side had paper left, so I entered that one. When I was sitting on the toilet, I heard someone come in and enter the cubicle next to mine. And then I heard a woman crying. I tried to ask if she was okay, but she just kept crying. As I finished my business and stood up, the crying suddenly stopped. Concerned, I stood outside the door of the middle cubicle, knocked slightly and asked again if she was okay, but there was still no answer. I tried peeking under the cubicle door, but no one was in there. But I could have sworn I heard someone come in earlier. I felt a bit spooked as I remembered the ghost stories that my coworkers used to tell about our building. I started walking fast to the exit, but somehow the doorknob that was fine when I'd entered was now broken, and I couldn't get the door to open. I was getting actually scared, and the crying began again. I started banging on the door and shaking the doorknob. It was no use. And then the sound of the woman crying started getting closer. Panicking, I also started crying while banging desperately on the door. The crying stopped. I could feel the woman standing right behind me. One of the lights in the ceiling started flickering, and the door still wouldn't open. I tried to avoid looking back in fear of what I might see, but from the corner of my eye, I saw in the mirror a reflection of a woman in the flickering light. She wasn't standing at my back, but half of her face was visible in one of the cubicle doorways. I closed my eyes. I was soaked in cold sweat. I remember shaking from fear, thinking I was going to die. I started praying as I cried. Only a minute or two, though it felt much longer, passed before the door suddenly opened and a maintenance lady stepped in. I was so relieved. I told her about what had happened, but she just apologized for the broken doorknob and ignored everything I said about the crying woman. I went straight to the office and apologized to my supervisor for coming back late from my break. I tried to tell her about what happened and told her that I was not feeling well, that I didn't think I could finish my shift that night. She didn't seem to believe my story. I warned my coworkers as well and told them about my scary toilet trip. I never went back to that comfort room ever again, and eventually left my job a few months later.
It was in 6th grade in junior high school. I remember this one specific day when there were the lockers. I looked and said, "Is anybody here?" There was no answer, so I took my gym clothes with me and thought stupidly that I should follow where the shadow was heading. The last curtain. So I heard in the distance talking, and it was a few girls walking past. I asked them if they saw anyone who was crying, but they said no. It was literally weird. When all the students arrived, the gym teacher asked one of the girls to open the gym doors. Usually, I'm the one that opens the gym doors, but she decided to let someone else have the turn. We were waiting for her, and then we heard a loud, sharp scream. Shortly, that girl ran into the locker room and cried. We were all confused, and she told us that she saw something, a baby, covered in blood. I went to the gym. The keys were on the floor. The gym door was opened, and I tried to turn on the lights, but they were completely off. I wasn't sure, but thought maybe, somehow it was due to the thunderstorm. I couldn't see anything because it was too dark, and when I stepped inside the gym, I heard crying. It was a baby crying, and it was coming from the stage. I was frozen, but I wanted to check what was going on here. I went closer to the stage, but the crying abruptly stopped and was followed by a crack noise. Then I heard crying from another girl. She was sobbing. All of a sudden, the lights were on. My teacher grabbed me and asked if I was okay. I told her that I heard something but didn't see anything. She looked at me calmly and said, "I know what you're talking about. You're lucky that you didn't see anything." Then she said when she was working late one day, she saw a body floating in the swimming pool, which is close to the gym. She thought it was one of the students, so she tried to save that person. When I tried to get to her, it was completely gone, she said. And then she told me there was the ghost of the girl who drowned a few years back. This girl was pregnant and she gave birth in the shower booth. She didn't want it, so she killed the baby by breaking its neck. Later on, she regretted what she did, so she drowned herself in the swimming pool. When I heard the whole story from my teacher, I felt a little bit sad. After that, I didn't see or hear anything, but I'm still wondering what was the shadow I saw in the locker room. And sometimes it still gives me goosebumps when I think about it, especially the crying of the baby and the bone-cracking noise. If the gym teacher did not come along, would I have seen that ghost of a girl holding the baby? Well, other than that, I just feel grateful that I didn't see anything that would shock me for my whole life.
So before getting into the story itself, I want to give some backstory on something that happened when I was around the age of 9. I grew up in a village called Hotlax in the northern parts of Sweden. The road leading from my school to my home was a long one, where the local authorities had to put up lamps which emitted a very dim blue light.
Subscribe and like
I always felt like a nervous wreck when I had to walk to and from my school. Both because, even with the lamps, the road was very dark, and also because I was bullied, so the bullies could have waited in the woods right next to the road. It was one event that I remembered vividly during the winter of 1999. I'd slept poorly the night before and the math lesson had been killing me, so I barely felt awake when I was beginning to walk home. The lamps were off, which isn't really so weird, as the sensors for the lamps were pretty low, so any kid could have taken a flashlight, put it towards the sensors, and after a few seconds, the lamps would shut down for a few minutes. Since I was so tired, I'd closed my eyes when I started walking. But after walking about 20 meters on this road, I opened my eyes and noticed that the lamps were off, and I stopped. I was getting nervous. I was reasoning with myself and decided to push on. I was 10, and in my youthful arrogance, I thought I had reached the age where my balls should have been as hard as Duke Nukem's. Hotlax is a very quiet village, so I was barely hearing anything except the wind when this happened. To the left of the road is a very thick forest, and suddenly I could just hear this loud scream coming from it. It was very similar to the male scream you can hear in movies when someone's in huge pain. With the speed of Usain Bolt, I ran as fast as I could towards my home without looking back. Now we're jumping to late autumn 2011. My parents were on a trip to the Canary Islands and asked me to move into their house just for the week so I could take care of the dog. The thought of spending a whole week in my old room, listening to my old Mayhem CDs and eating pizza were just too good to be true. I always walked with my dog outside during midnight, because then I didn't have to take him outside again until the late morning hours. This time was no different, except I decided to walk a bit longer. I decided to walk along Oxelvägen and then follow Inimarksvägen towards Norra Hotlaxvägen. There are no lamps on the most parts of Inimarksvägen, so after leaving Oxelvägen, I stopped. I lit a cigar and told my dog to stay close to me. While walking along the road, I was just enjoying the fresh. When I came to that area, my dog stopped and started barking towards the area I described. I said, "What the hell," with a pretty loud voice. The person turned around towards me. If I didn't know any better, I could have sworn that only the head and hands turned, as I didn't see any movements at all on the rest of the body. A white mask. The guy was wearing a white mask with a slit for each of his eyes. My dog started whimpering. The guy raised his right hand with all of his fingers pointing towards me, and he screamed. It sounded like the exact same scream I'd heard as a kid walking home from school that afternoon. What must have been survival instinct, I just started running. When I had ran for 20 meters or so, I stopped to see if my dog was still with me, which he was, and then looked towards the spot the guy had stood. He wasn't there. He had moved to the spot where I stood, now with his hands down, but the mask still towards me. I started, my body was shaking.
Kami ay laging inaapi. Nagtago sa ilalim. Tiniis ang init at hirap. At sa aming pagbangon.
This happened when I was in my junior year of high school. I decided to house in. She agreed, but told us that the electricity doesn't work, so it was best to practice during the daytime. The house was pretty big. It was 3 stories tall with a rooftop. However, this house was unfinished. After class, we all gathered in front of the house. It was around 4 p.m. I brought my laptop to play music, and we practiced for a while, and finally almost memorized it. Then I suggested that we should record our dance using my laptop's camera to see if we were making any mistakes or weren't synchronized. We were having fun with each other while dancing, and we even took pictures. After that, while taking a break, we played our dance video. It was good at first. However, in the middle of us dancing, there was a woman's awful screaming in the background, like someone was being murdered. The same continuous scream was going on and on while it was recording. It was already getting dark outside, and we were in shock that we couldn't even move our bodies at all. We knew that we were the only ones in the room. And of course, we would have stopped our practice if there was someone else there. And furthermore, we did not remember hearing anyone scream continuously. Shaking my hands with fear, much higher and very sharp. I've never heard that kind of horrific voice in my whole life. Paranoid at first. But when I played the video, she was creeped out too. Mom didn't say anything but forced me to delete the video. Ever since then, we never rehearse there anymore, and every time I look outside my window, I am scared that I might see the lady behind those screams.
Okay, that's the end of the video. Wait. That's the end of the video. Bye.